The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
Lieutenant Colonel, I'll go ahead and introduce Marco first because I definitely want to get to you. Marco, I have not ever spoken to you on a blog talk, but I've heard wonderful things about you. So kind of want you to tell us a little bit about your background and what you're doing with Lakin's Action Fund, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I'll just take a few seconds because Terry's only got about 15 minutes. So let me just give you a quick intro, and we'll turn it over to him. So real quickly, I've done marketing communications for years. About 4.5 years ago, a friend called me and said, hey, do you want to run TechPoint for this lawsuit? I said, sure. What are we doing? Oh, we're challenging Obama's eligibility. I was like, sign me up, right? So I worked for the first phase of this, which was Paul Jensen, Ducky Hemingway case that they started with Terry. When Terry came to the court-martial, he and his brother asked me to take the Terry Lakin Action Fund and build it while Terry was in prison, which I did, and subsequently, have built a good friendship with Terry and worked on many projects for him that we can get to later. So it's been quite a long journey for me, and we can cover some of the details after Terry gets off. I'd like to turn over to Terry because, he's the one who made the choice to do this extraordinary thing. So let's go back to him.
Absolutely. Well, Terry, it's definitely an honor having you on. As a matter of fact, I think that I interviewed you about 4 years ago. About that time, I was on a co-host with Darla Daywald, and you might remember of GrassFire.org. So at that point in time, but it is incredible to have you on, and I've got to say I salute your patriotism. I really do.
Well, thank you for having me on, and I appreciate all your listeners and their, knowledge about this subject. It's I was listening to you earlier, and it's a situation that just, like you were saying, it shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't have to come to something like this, and I, the more people that know about it and learn about it, and they have to realize that there is a extreme problem with our country and our Constitution, and it starts with some eligibility with our Commander-in-Chief.
Absolutely. Well, I put out the broadcast email, and as a matter of fact, I don't know that you got that today because I don't know if I had that email, your email address with me at the time. But I sent out there, and the topic that I gave for the show was, when the Commander-in-Chief is a fraud. Like, what do you do? And as I mentioned earlier, we can go back to the Nuremberg trials about when they realized, they said, hey, we were just following orders, and that was not an excuse. You were one of the very few that actually stood up and said, wait a minute, I don't trust that this Commander-in-Chief is legitimate. And there was so many things, and the evidence has been enormous that he is a fraud in office, and I can only use it that way. And this would be the first time in American history that we've had an absolute fraud in office, and his actions have been absolutely unconstitutional at every turn.
I think, I suspected that from the information that we had, prior to his election, and, nothing has changed my mind since then either. It just gets worse and worse, and, I do hope that Sheriff Joe Arpaio out of Arizona has, the information, and that, it can bring some light on this subject in the next, months to come.
Oh, absolutely. Well, of course, we've got a broad-based listenership. Why don't you just go ahead and tell us, because I know that you're short on time, and I will try to get you back on where we've got a longer segment where we can talk about other things that have happened and what you're moving on, and I'll, of course, work with Marco after this. But since you've got short time, kind of give a rundown of exactly, what process took place. When did you recognize that you needed to do something? And then tell what happened and what's going on now.
Well, I believe I kind of came up through the military ranks as a physician, and I loved the military. I loved every job that I had. I loved treating our troops and their families, and thought that I was part of a great organization. and with great values. And as I learned more and more throughout my military education too, I learned truly what our officer's oath and what our obligations and more of what we were pledging our allegiance to, to protect and defend the Constitution. And
absolutely.
Can you hear me okay? I'm getting a lot of static.
Oh. Yeah, absolutely, and I'm kind of picking up a lot of static as well, but we can hear you just fine.
But I believe I was kind of at the kind of pinnacle of my career. I had lots of deployments and not a lot of combat action, but I was in combat zones, and I was a good team player. I think I was a solid performer, both militarily and medically, and certainly thought that would be my career and I would retire. I was nearing promotion to full bird colonel and had a great job at the Pentagon, but when I became aware that I was going to be put up on orders to deploy to Afghanistan with this surge that Obama directly ordered, I believe.
Right.
To me, that was putting myself in a combat zone ordered by our commander-in-chief, and for me to go there and support the troops that are under me, I thought that I had to ask the question, and I began to ask the question prior to that through my congressman, and I had my doubts even before his first election, but the answers that I got from congressmen and senior staffers and even my commander-in-chief at the time, General Casey, was that I didn't have the right to question them. And, General Casey even said in a memorandum that he was not in my chain of command, and therefore he didn't have to answer my question, that all I was asking was for him to come out and say that we had a legitimate commander-in-chief per the Constitution. And
that's incredible.
And when I talk with senior staffers on Congressional Hill, and they look at me and they say they knew there was a problem before the election, but they didn't know what to do about it because the media wouldn't bite into it, I lost faith in my leadership, both through the chain of command and through our representatives. I could not believe that they would be ordering troops into harm's way with knowing that something's wrong. And
absolutely.
I could not be a part of that. So
well, go ahead.
Oh no, my prelude to that left me with hard decisions. Do I go and take part in jeopardizing my life and putting other troops in harm's way, or do I stand up and say I'm not going to take it until we get some answers? And I believe that I did this for troops that couldn't answer or ask the question. I believe that the enlisted troops, their oath of office is a little bit different than officers, and I think that it's officers' duties to stand up and question orders when they can. And I tried to do that in a peaceful manner and using the system, and I took my punishment as they saw fit, but I still think that there's going to be some answers to come out soon.
Well, I do hope so, and I'm definitely going to get into the movie coming out. We'll get into that with Marco when you've got a little more time. You mentioned Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Last year, I was one of the founders, organizers of the Constitutional Sheriff's Convention out in Las Vegas, with Sheriff Richard Mack, of course, out there with CSPOA, and then Joe Arpaio was out there. And as we were speaking to him, he was just kicking off that investigation, and I know that he's still got that in full swing. And, of course, the Obama administration has been going after him heavily, and I think, as you were saying, that there's going to be more and more information unveiled in there. But let me ask you just, point blank, do you think that there's going to be any kind of a major change or a shift where they're actually going to start acknowledging this? I'm hoping that they do, of course. I pray that they do. But, what do you think about what's going to come out of all of this and, your efforts?
Well, I guess I've been, repeatedly disappointed by, at every juncture. thought that there was several good congressmen that were going to stand up and ask the question too. But if we have representatives that don't represent us and don't care about upholding the Constitution, I think our country is in a world of hurt.
Great. Great.
I do. I think the world of Colonel Allen West, but he ran his campaign and at a campaign gathering before he was elected. He said that he had questions about what passport Obama used when he traveled to Pakistan, and then all of a sudden it's not an issue to him anymore.
Right.
I just don't understand things like that. Was he?
Well, when we even see Donald Trump coming out saying that he wanted evidence, I thought, okay, at least he's got a name out there. Maybe he can pull some influence. But even that, faded away as well. Like I said, I've just been, baffled that we can allow this. The American people that they will allow this. I speak fairly regularly about the fact that, unfortunately, the American populace has been dumbed down and seems to be made docile, and are allowing a lot of stuff that that shows a very severe lack of character in this country that we're going to have to address. Would you speak to that?
Well, I think you're exactly right. It's the mainstream media determines what the public hears, and they kind of drive the show. And I think the lack of truth, or the even deception, or hiding of the truth is a big factor that the mainstream media does. And for us to be, what are we, 6 months out of Benghazi, and we have no answers to questions about that, and the Fast and Furious, where are the answers for that? And it just seems like there are horrible things going on with our government, and they just get buried, or people drive on to the next latest thing to take your mind away from investigating potential crimes that have happened in the past.
So let me go ahead and bring up one caller that just seems like he's adamant about talking to you, and we'll see what he has to say. This is Chris from New Orleans. Chris, how you doing tonight?
Colonel Lakin, sir, fine. My name is Chris Farrell, and I'm your humble servant in Christ Jesus the Lord. In your book, you write on page 89 that you attended a fundraiser for Allen West, who was running for Congress. You relate his story of being charged for having discharged his sidearm by the side of the head of an Iraqi policeman who, as it turned out, was in fact providing intelligence to our enemy to be used in the placement of IEDs. Colonel West himself was wrongly prosecuted and persecuted. And in fact, you relate that when Colonel West was asked if he would do it again, he said, "If it is about the lives of my men and their safety, I'd go through hell with a gasoline can." And that on the way out of the fundraiser, he stopped by and told you that you are doing what is right. Now, since, metaphorically speaking, Allen West is in a position of celebrity to hold a proverbial gun and fire the right words by the head of the mainstream media and preserve and defend the Constitution consistent with the officer's oath that he took, by demanding a congressional investigation into the purported constitutional eligibility of Mr. Obama, including a forensic investigation of the documents which the Manchurian Muslim from Mombasa has proffered as evidence of his yet unproven status of constitutional eligibility as a natural-born citizen. How else can you explain Allen West turning down, actually lying to Pastor Carl Gallups and lead detective of Sheriff Joe Arpaio's volunteer cold case posse at CPAC than hypocrisy? He told them that he would not do anything about it because it might have disadvantageous effect on his future political aspirations. That's all.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.